Norway Chess began today. 10 of the strongest players in the world are doing battle in Stavanger, including, of course, Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, on home turf. And what a dramatic first round we had. Let's go straight away to Magnus Carlsen's game. He had the white pieces against Veselin Topalov. Carlsen was grinding away in, well, typical fashion for him. You can see he has a pawn up, he has an extra pawn here, one step away from queening, but it is opposite coloured bishops, and that's not easy to remove, this blockader here. But Carlsen has made some progress, and at this moment, after 58 moves, Topalov played f4, which was kind of rushing it, and Magnus seized his chance to take on h5. Topalov took on f2, a check from Carlsen, king f7, and here the game was stopped and declared a win for Topalov. Incredible. Carlsen had lost on time. He simply didn't know what the time control was. He thought he was getting extra time at move 60. This is move 60. In fact, all he got was a 30-second increment. The time control in this tournament is 40 moves in 2 hours. Then they get an additional hour plus 30 seconds per move, but no extra time at move 60. It's a very unusual time control, and Carlsen wasn't at the beginning of the game, at the start of the round, when the arbiter actually announced the time control. Of course, this was in the rules and regulations, and Carlsen should know about it, so it's his own fault. But a tragedy for the world champion, because in this final position, he has finally broken through, and actually it's a win for white. Basically, you can do it with checks. And there are a couple of unfortunate factors in this position for black. One unfortunate factor is the position of this bishop. If the king tries to step out of trouble with king e5 here, then obviously queen takes bishop check is rather uncomfortable. Well, let me show you another variation. King g7. It's very nice that the queen and bishop combine on different, usually on different colour squares. That way they complement each other. So queen on a dark square, bishop on a light square. So that's what black tries to avoid. Black tries to avoid stepping into a bishop check, but the queen can actually force the king onto a light square, and then the bishop comes to a better square. So this is a forced sequence. Just bear with me, we're making progress as white. I mean, I don't think these moves are too difficult. Carlsen realised that he had a winning position, but he was just taking his time. The king goes back, bishop d3 is a very attractive mate. The king goes up the board, then, well, finally we're making progress, and now we can push the king into the middle of the board. Everything works out perfectly for white here. And now this very nice check. If king d4, then queen b6 skewers, very important. So the pieces are seemingly lined up perfectly. If, let me see, king e3, then queen d3 is a very attractive checkmate, an epaulette checkmate. And one last one, if king e5, again we can force the king to this unfortunate diagonal. So Carlsen had a winning position. I feel very sorry for him, but in the end, he only has himself to blame. There was only one draw in this opening round. There were 4 decisive games. Let's have a look at the game between Hikaru Nakamura and John Ludwig Hammer. Now, Hammer, who is from Norway, is a second of Magnus Carlsen. They often work together, and he's been making great progress with his chess recently. He's definitely on the up, but he's not yet in the top echelons, and so he's going to have a hard time here. But in this position, looks a little bit unclear. You can see that Nakamura has got this far advanced e-pawn and cemented a bishop on f7, but the bishop is blockading. In the meantime, black has this very nice outpost for a piece, and white has to be careful because his king is a little bit exposed. But Nakamura found a very nice idea here. First of all, rook f1. So that means, obviously, there are tricks against the queen. For example, if black takes on b4, then that's a nice discovered attack. And you're attacking the bishop there. So Hammer played knight e4. Nakamura exchanged. And now he found an excellent move. When you see the move, you think, oh yeah, obvious. But in a game, I would say not so simple. There's a slight problem for white with the pawn on b4. If this is taken, then bishop takes a3. But Nakamura found a solution to these problems. Bishop e3. Excellent idea. Quite simply, white wants to remove this important blockader. So, for example, well, as in the game continuation, black took the pawn here and just bishop c5, getting rid of this blockader, and then the e-pawn is going to roll, and black has absolutely no defense here. Hammer tried rook d2, so obviously with a nasty threat to check here, but the rook steps out of the way, making room for the king, and actually black is utterly lost here. Hammer tried a few tricks with this b-pawn, but this can be defended very easily. White is a piece up now. Okay, be careful. There's a check here and potential tricks, but that rules any unpleasantness out. Black makes a queen, but white gives this up, and now the e-pawn rolls home. And very sportingly, John Ludwig Hammer allowed himself to be checkmated. So a neat conclusion to the game. So, but very nice technique from Nakamura. And let me look at another game. Anish Giri against Alexander Grischuk. Now, Giri had sacrificed a pawn quite early on in this game. Has a far advanced d-pawn. Very active pieces. Weak dart squares around black's king. And you can see, well, black's pieces aren't really very good here. The bishop is blocked in. But how exactly is white going to make progress? Well, I really love this next move from Giri. It's one of my favourite attacking moves, and anyone that's seen my latest video on Garry Kasparov, and indeed several of games of Garry Kasparov, will recognise this move. Giri played here king h2. Now, perhaps you were imagining some bold sacrifice and not this calm little king move. It makes the king completely safe, that's one thing. It also means that when this knight moves, rook takes rook will no longer be check, so any discovered attack with that knight will be particularly dangerous. For example, queen a2, looking to bring the queen back, knight c3 wins immediately because the knight attacks the queen, and rook takes rook is no longer check. This is very typical of the tactical ideas that king h2 introduces. It's a beautiful move. And actually, fittingly, Garry Kasparov was actually present in Stavanger and spectating this first round. Very much in his style. Grischuk was running short of time. If he'd had a bit more time, perhaps he'd have found queen a5, which gives him, well, hopes to hang on in this position. Instead, he played a5, and really this queen is just too far away from the defence. Knight g5 from Giri, excellent move. Well, let me show you the threat. Let's suppose black advances again with the pawn, then white simply takes on f7, and well, that's a winning attack. You can see that very plainly, and the queen are ready to come in. So Grischuk tried knight f8, but now Giri wins by very simple methods, actually. I mean, there are several ways to win this position, but this is, well, so trivial. There's nothing flashy about this at all. It's absolutely straightforward. He just moves his pieces in and there's just no defence. He took on f7. If rook takes, of course, then rook e8 is mate. Next move. So Grischuk had to simply give up his queen, and now this is too much. Sometimes rook and bishop can put up a defence, but not when white has this fantastic passed pawn and an extra pawn on this side of the board. And now it only remains for Giri to slowly advance on the king side. So this is what happened. And it doesn't help that black's king is so exposed in this position. So white just gently squeezes on the king side. There's nothing that black can do. And now the advance of the h-pawn. In fact, Grischuk resigned here. Well, it's not before time. White is going to play h5, if possible h6, and then we're heading towards a Zugzwang. And or if this is taken, then queen takes, and then, well, you continue the squeeze with the f5 pawn. It's utterly lost. Very nice game by Giri. I should mention that in the other two games, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave defeated Levon Aronian with a really nice technical performance, but rather a long game, so I'm afraid we don't get to see that one. And we also don't get to see the game between Vishy Anand and Fabiano Caruana, which was, well, a fairly lifeless draw. But a very exciting first day, and do watch out for my round reports each day on Norway Chess.